The restaurant was one of those places where the lighting is dim to hide the prices, and the silverware is heavy enough to feel like a weapon in your hand. The air smelled of truffle oil and expensive perfume, a scent that always made me feel just a little bit out of place. But I wasn't there for the food. I was there because my daughter, Rachel, had insisted. She sat across from me, her face glowing in the candlelight, looking every bit the successful young woman she pretended to be. Beside her was her new boyfriend, a nice enough young man named Mark, who seemed dazzled by her. They were laughing, clinking their crystal glasses, while I sat quietly, sipping water, my stomach tied in a knot that had been tightening all day. Then, the moment arrived. The waiter, a tall young man with a stiff collar and a hesitant expression, approached our table. He held the black leather bill folder in his hands, his eyes darting briefly to me before he set it down in the center of the pristinely white tablecloth. Before the leather even touched the linen, Rachel snickered. It was a sound I knew well, a mix of arrogance and dismissal. She didn't even look at the total. She just waved her hand airily and said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear, "Oh, just hand it to my mom. She always pays. It's her treat." She smiled at Mark, performing the role of the cherished daughter. "Mom loves spoiling me, don't you?" Mark looked at me, offering a polite, grateful smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Bennett. That's very generous." The room seemed to hold its breath. I looked at the folder, then up at the waiter, and finally at my daughter. Her smile was plastered on, confident, expecting the usual routine. I would sigh, reach into my purse, pull out my worn leather wallet, and cover her extravagance while she pocketed the credit. But not tonight. I didn't reach for my purse. I kept my hands folded calmly on the table. I looked the waiter dead in the eye and spoke with a voice that was steadier than I felt. "Please take the bill back," I said softly. "There is something wrong here." Rachel's smile faltered, just a fraction. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Just give him your card." I ignored her. I spoke to the waiter again. "Actually, I believe you already have a card on file for this table. The one that was attempted earlier today." The waiter nodded, looking relieved that he didn't have to keep the secret any longer. "Yes, ma'am, as we discussed on the phone. Someone tried to place a pre-authorization on your card for this table before you even arrived." Rachel's face froze. It was a mask of sudden, sheer terror. The color drained from her cheeks so fast she looked like a ghost. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice pitching high. "I think you do, Rachel," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. In that moment, the entire table went silent. The clinking of cutlery around us seemed to stop. Mark looked from Rachel to me, confusion knitting his brows. Rachel's secret, the entitlement, the theft, the lies, didn't just crack, it shattered right there on the white tablecloth. I didn't know it then, but things were about to get worse before they could ever get better. But to understand how we got to this frozen silence, you have to understand the noise that came before it. I wasn't always a woman who counted pennies, but life has a way of teaching you arithmetic, whether you want to learn it or not. I raised Rachel and her two older brothers, David and Michael, by myself. Their father decided when Rachel was only 4 years old that the weight of a family was too heavy for his shoulders, so he simply set us down and walked away. He left us with nothing but a mortgage we couldn't afford and a silence in the house that echoed for years. I didn't have time to mourn the marriage. I had 3 mouths to feed. I took a job at the local grocery store, scanning items for 8 hours a day, smiling at neighbors who looked at me with pity. But that wasn't enough to keep the lights on and the creditors away. So, in the evenings, I put on a different uniform. I cleaned office buildings downtown, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans until my back screamed and my hands were raw from the chemicals. I remember coming home late, smelling of lemon polish and exhaustion. I'd check on the children sleeping in their beds. their chests rising and falling in the rhythmic peace that only children know. I would stand in the doorway and promise myself that they would never see the struggle. I wanted their lives to be full of yes, because my life had become a series of no. The boys were easy. They understood early on that we didn't have much. They got part-time jobs as soon as they were legal and helped out. But Rachel was the baby. She was the only girl. And maybe, in my guilt over her father leaving, I tried to fill that void with things. If she wanted ballet lessons, I picked up extra shifts. If she needed the brand name sneakers to fit in with the popular girls, I skipped lunch for a month to buy them. I paid every fee, every bill, and covered every emergency. I shielded her from the word budget. I shielded her from the reality of our survival. I remember her 16th birthday. She wanted a party at a fancy skating rink. I couldn't afford it, not really. But I looked at her hopeful face, those big eyes that looked just like her father's, and I couldn't bear to break her heart. I took out a small loan, telling myself I'd pay it back over time. The party was a success. She laughed, she twirled, she shone. She never asked how I paid for it. She just assumed it was taken care of. And that became the pattern of our lives. When she became an adult, I thought the dynamic would shift. I thought she would stand on her own 2 feet. But the requests just changed shape. Instead of ballet shoes, it was car repairs. Instead of field trip fees, it was rent shortages because she'd spent her paycheck on clothes. Instead of lunch money, it was phone bills. "Mom, I'm just a little short this month," she would say, her voice sweet and pleading. "I promise I'll pay you back." She never did. And I never asked. I always believed that supporting my children meant keeping them afloat. I thought that if I stopped paddling for her, she would drown. I didn't realize that by doing all the paddling, I was teaching her never to learn how to swim. Looking back, that was the moment everything began to change. When her childhood ended, but her dependence didn't. The shift was subtle at first, like the slow erosion of a shoreline. It wasn't one big wave that took away my dignity. It was the gentle, constant lapping of her expectations. Rachel stopped saying, "Thank you." That was the first sign. In the beginning, when I would cover a bill, she would hug me and say, "You're the best, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." But as her 20s progressed, the gratitude evaporated. An attitude of assumption replaced it. She began inviting me to dinner with her friends. At first, I was flattered. I thought, how nice. She wants her mother involved in her social life. I would dress up, excited to be included. We would laugh, share appetizers, and tell stories. But when the check came, the dynamic constantly shifted. Rachel wouldn't even look at the bill. She would continue talking to her friends or checking her phone, while the little black folder sat on the table like an uninvited guest. Eventually, the silence would become awkward. Her friends would reach for their purses, and Rachel would say, casually, "Oh, put that away. Mom's got it." She would turn to me with a bright, expectant smile. "Right, Mom? You don't mind?" And I, not wanting to embarrass her in front of her friends, not wanting to be the stingy mother, would smile tightly and say, "Of course. It's my treat." She started using phrases that made my stomach churn. She would tell people, right in front of me, "Mom is used to covering things. She likes feeling useful. It gives her purpose." Useful. Like a kitchen appliance. Like an old coat rack. Not loved, not respected, just useful. She began reorganizing family gatherings around my budget, not hers. If I suggested a potluck at home because money was tight, she would pout. "But Mom, I really wanted to go to that Italian place. Just use the credit card. You can pay it off later." She rewrote reality to suit her narrative. She told her brothers, she said, my sister, she said, that anyone who would list, and that I insisted on paying. "Mom just loves to spoil me," she'd say with a shrug. I try to stop her, but she won't listen. It was a lie, but it was one she had told so many times that she started to believe it. Slowly, I could feel myself disappearing, I was becoming less of a mother, a source of wisdom, love, and comfort, and more of a funding source. I was an ATM with a heartbeat. I felt the weight of it in my chest every time my phone rang, dreading that it was her, knowing the conversation would eventually circle back to money. I didn't know it then, but the real pain was still ahead of me. The dependence was bad, but the manipulation was about to turn cruel. Once the expectation was set, Rachel had to maintain it. And when I started to show signs of resistance, a hesitation here, a heavy sigh there, she brought out the weapons of emotional warfare. Whenever I tried to mention my own finances, perhaps mentioning that the electric bill was high, or that I needed to save for some dental work, Rachel would immediately cut me off. "Mom, you're alone," she would say, her voice dropping to a tone of pity that felt more like an accusation. "The boys are gone. Dad is gone. What else do you even spend money on? It's not like you have a life." Those words cut deep. It's not like you have a life. As if my existence, my sacrifices, my decades of hard work were nothing but a waiting room for her needs. She began comparing me to others. "You know, Sarah's parents paid for her entire down payment on her condo. They actually want her to succeed. Sometimes I feel like you want me to struggle." The logic was twisted, but she delivered it with such conviction that I would find myself apologizing. "No, honey, of course I want you to succeed," I'd say, reaching for my checkbook to prove my love. If I hesitated to pay for something explicitly frivolous, like a weekend trip to Vegas or a designer jacket, she would call me selfish. "I can't believe you're being this selfish, Mom. After everything I've been through." She would bring up her father's leaving, using a trauma from 20 years ago to justify a purchase today. She even recruited my sister, Linda. Linda, who had married a wealthy man and never worked a day of hard labor in her life, would call me up. "Grace," Rachel called me crying. "She says you're cutting her off. You need to support the younger generation. It's hard out there." I felt pressed from all sides. Rachel perfected the art of the breakdown. She would call me, sobbing uncontrollably, saying she was overwhelmed, that she couldn't breathe, that the stress was killing her. My mothering instinct would kick in, panic rising in my throat. I would rush over or transfer money immediately to fix it. And then, miraculously, the tears would dry up. An hour later, I'd see a post on social media of her out for cocktails, smiling, carefree. The crisis wasn't real. The crisis was a transaction fee she paid in tears to access my funds. Every conversation became a manipulation disguised as affection. "I love you, Mom," she would say, but the words felt hollow, like a greeting card bought at a gas station. I was tired. Bone tired. But I was trapped in a cycle I didn't know how to break. And then came the family reunion, where she decided to tighten the trap in public. It was mid-July, hot and sticky, the kind of heat that makes your clothes cling to you. We were at a large seafood restaurant for our annual extended family reunion. There were about 20 of us. Cousins, aunts, uncles, the boys, and Rachel. The mood was festive. People were ordering crab legs, lobster, pitchers of beer, and expensive bottles of wine. I sat at the end of the table, nursing an iced tea, doing the mental math in my head. I knew everyone usually split the bill, or paid for their own families, but looking at the abundance on the table, I felt a familiar anxiety. Towards the end of the meal, the conversation lulled. Rachel stood up, clinking her fork against her glass. She looked radiant, commanding the room's attention. "Everyone listen up," she announced, her voice booming. "I just want to say how happy I am that we're all here. Family is everything." A chorus of ahs went around the table. Then she dropped the bomb. "And because my mom is the most generous, wonderful woman in the world, she's treating everyone tonight. Dinner is on her." The table erupted in applause. "Thanks, Grace. Wow, that's amazing. You're the best, Aunt Grace." I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The bill for a table this size would be astronomical. Hundreds. Maybe over $1,000. Money I did not have. I needed the money for my property tax bill due next week. I looked at Rachel. She wasn't looking at me. She was basking in the applause, smiling benevolently, as if she were the one paying. I leaned forward, hissing in a whisper, "Rachel, what are you doing? I can't afford this." She leaned down, her smile never wavering. But her eyes turned into hard, cold stones. "Don't embarrass yourself, Mom," she muttered sharply, her voice low. "Don't be cheap. Everyone is looking at you. Just pay it." I looked around. My cousins were smiling at me, raising their glasses. My sister Linda gave me a nod of approval. If I spoke up now, if I said, "No, I didn't agree to this," I would look like a monster. I would be the villain ruining the family night. I felt humiliated. I felt small. I felt trapped in a situation I didn't create. Held hostage by my own daughter's ego. I handed over my credit card with a shaking hand. When the waiter brought the slip back, the number made me nauseous. I signed it, feeling like I was signing away my dignity. That night, lying in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, I scrolled through my phone. I saw a picture Rachel had posted of the dinner. The caption read, "Mom loves spoiling us! Best family ever." I'm blessed. She was getting the social credit. I was getting the debt. But even then, I didn't know the depths she had sunk to. I didn't know it then, but things were about to get worse. A week after the reunion, I was sitting at my kitchen table, sorting through the mail. The financial hangover from the dinner was still weighing on me. I was figuring out which bills I could pay late without incurring a fee. My phone buzzed. It was a text alert from my bank. Fraud alert to attempted transaction of $2,400 at Lux Handbags. Card not present. Please contact us immediately. My stomach dropped. I didn't shop at luxury handbag stores. I grabbed the phone and called the bank immediately. The representative, a kind woman named Sarah, walked me through the security checks. "Mrs. Bennett," she said, "the transaction was attempted online, but the shipping address was different from your billing address." "What was the shipping address?" I asked. My hand trembling, she read it out. It was Rachel's apartment address. I felt the room spin. Are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am. And looking at your history, I see several small transactions over the last few months labeled as grocery vendor. But the merchant codes map back to high-end beauty retailers. Did you authorize these?" I pulled up my online statement on my laptop. There they were. A $50 here, a $80 there, hidden in plain sight. She had set up my card on her phone and had been siphoning money for months, disguising the transaction so I wouldn't notice. I hung up the phone, feeling sick. But the final blow came the next day. I went to Rachel's apartment to confront her. But when I got to her door, it was slightly ajar. I heard her laughing on the phone inside. "No, she has no clue," Rachel was saying. "I told you, Mom's clueless. She never checks the details. I'm basically training her to just pay without questioning. It's so easy." She paused, listening to the person on the other end. "Guilt. Why should I feel guilt?" Rachel laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "She owes me. She's the parent. It's her job to provide. Besides, she doesn't need the money. She just sits at home." I stood there in the hallway, my hand hovering over the doorbell. I couldn't push it. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal hit deeper than the theft. It wasn't just about the money. It was the contempt. She didn't love me. She didn't even like me. She viewed me as a resource to be mined until I was empty. I turned around and walked away without knocking. I walked all the way to my car on shaky legs. The mother in me wanted to weep, to storm in and demand an explanation. But the woman in me, she was starting to wake up. I drove home in silence. No radio. No thoughts. Just the hum of the tires on the pavement. When I got into my house, my small, quiet home that I had worked 2 jobs to keep, I sat down in the living room. I looked at the walls. They were covered in framed photos. Rachel at graduation. Rachel is at her dance recital. Rachel is smiling with her brothers. For years, I looked at those pictures and saw love. I saw my purpose. But tonight, looking at them, I saw something else. I saw a stranger. I saw a girl who had learned that if she smiled bright enough, she could take whatever she wanted. I realized I had allowed Rachel to erode my dignity, one favor at a time. I had taught her that my needs were secondary, that my boundaries were suggestions, and that my love was a currency she could spend. My hands started to shake, violent tremors that rattled the teacup I tried to hold. I set it down. I had been invisible to her, valuable only as a bank account. I closed my eyes and let the tears come. I cried for the little girl she used to be. I cried for the mother I tried to be. I cried for the money I would never see again. But as the tears stopped, a cold, hard clarity settled in my chest. It was a feeling I hadn't felt in years. It was self-preservation. I stood up and walked to the mirror in the hallway. I looked at my own reflection. The gray hairs, the worry lines, the tired eyes. No more. I whispered to the empty house. I choose myself this time. The internal shift was painful. It felt like breaking a bone so it could be reset appropriately. But it was empowering. I wasn't just Grace the mother anymore. I was Grace the survivor. And survivors don't let themselves get eaten alive. The next morning, I didn't call Rachel. I didn't send an angry text. I drank my coffee, got dressed, and went to the bank. I sat down with the branch manager. I need to close every card connected to my name, I said calmly. And I need to open new accounts with security measures that require my physical presence for any transaction over $50. The manager looked concerned but processed the paperwork. I reported the unauthorized transactions, not to the police, not yet, but to the bank's fraud department. I wanted a paper trail. I printed every statement for the last 2 years. I sat with a highlighter and marked every transaction that Rachel had made. Groceries, that were makeup. The gas charges when her car was in the shop. The online orders were sent to her address. I spoke with a financial advisor about locking down my retirement fund, so it couldn't be touched by anyone but me. I quietly prepared documents. I organized my files. I built a fortress around my life. For 2 weeks, Rachel called me as usual. Hey, Mom. Can you transfer me $50 for gas? I played the part. Oh, the bank system is down today, honey. I can't access the app. Or, I'll try later, I'm busy right now. I gave her excuses, stalling. She got annoyed, but she didn't suspect a thing. She assumed I was just being slow, just being clueless mom. While she assumed nothing had changed, I was building a wall she could not climb. I was preparing for the final act. And then, the opportunity presented itself. Rachel called me on a Tuesday. Her voice was chirpy, excited. Mom, Mark and I want to take you out to dinner on Friday. His parents are in town, and we want everyone to meet. We're going to the Gilded Table. The Gilded Table was the most expensive restaurant in the city. That sounds lovely, I said, my voice steady. Great, and Mom. Her voice dropped to that familiar conspiratorial whisper. Don't embarrass me, remember. You're paying. Mark's parents are, well, they're wealthy. And I told them you insisted on treating everyone to celebrate Mark's promotion. Another lie. Another trap. I'll be there, I said. I didn't agree to pay. I just said I'd be there. Friday night came. I dressed in my best suit, a navy blue one I used to wear to church. I felt like I was wearing armor. When I arrived, they were already seated. Rachel, Mark, and an elegant older couple, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. Rachel looked nervous but eager. She hugged me. Remember, Mom. Don't make it weird, she hissed in my ear. I sat down. I remained quiet. My calm demeanor seemed to unsettle her. Usually I would be fluttering around, trying to please everyone. Tonight, I was still. Rachel ordered the most expensive items on the menu. The Wagyu steak. The vintage Cabernet. She ordered appetizers for the table without asking. Mom loves to host, she told the Hendersons, beaming. She's just so generous. Mrs. Henderson smiled politely. That is very kind of you, Grace. I just smiled back, a small, enigmatic smile. Rachel has always had expensive taste, I said. Rachel laughed, a little too loudly. She kept performing. bragging about her life, her investments, her plans, all funded by me. Though the Hendersons didn't know that. The meal ended. The table was cleared. The conversation dwindled. Then, the waiter approached. This brings us back to the moment where the story began. The bill is on the table. The snicker. The demand. Just hand it to my mom. She always pays. And my response. Please bring the bill back. There's something wrong here. The silence that followed my revelation about the declined card was thick enough to choke on. Rachel was staring at me, her eyes wide with panic and disbelief. Mom, stop it. She hissed, abandoning the sweet act. You're making a scene. Just pay the bill and we'll talk later. No. I said. I didn't whisper this time. I spoke clearly. I reached into my bag. But I didn't pull out a wallet. I pulled out a manila envelope. I'm not paying for you anymore, Rachel. Not today. Not ever again. Rachel's face turned a deep, splotchy red. Mark looked terrified. His parents looked like they wanted to vanish. You can't do this, Rachel sputtered. You're my mother! You have to help me? I have helped you, I said, my voice trembling slightly but gaining strength with every word. I helped you by paying your rent, your car, your clothes, your vacations. I helped you until I have nothing left to give. I opened the envelope and slid the papers onto the table. The highlighted bank statements fanned out across the white linen. These are the transactions you hid, Rachel. The ones you labeled groceries. The credit card you tried to use today was not one I authorized. That is fraud. That is theft. Rachel stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're crazy! You're ungrateful! I'm your daughter! How can you be so dramatic and cruel in front of Mark? Cruel. I looked at her, sadness washing over me. Rachel, allowing you to rob your own mother. That was cruel. Stopping you. That is the only act of love I have left. I turned to the hovering waiter, who looked uncomfortable. I will pay for my meal, and for Mr. and Mrs. Henderson's meal, as an apology for this display. But I will not pay for hers. Or his. I nodded at Mark. I placed enough cash on the table to cover my portion and the parents'. Then I stood up. I'm done, Rachel. The ATM is closed. I walked away. I heard her screaming after me, calling me names that no mother should ever hear. But I didn't turn back. I walked out of those double doors into the cool night air. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of a grown woman on my back. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. With her access to my finances cut off, Rachel's lifestyle crumbled like a house of cards in a hurricane. The credit card she had tried to use was canceled. The backup cards she had stolen numbers from were dead. Within days, her rent was overdue. Her landlord, whom she had always kept at bay with my emergency transfers, issued an eviction notice. Her utilities began shutting down. She started calling me nonstop, 10-20 times a day, leaving angry voicemails. You're ruining my life! How am I supposed to eat? It's all your fault! I didn't listen to them. I saved them as evidence. Then archived them. Mark, the boyfriend she was trying to impress, didn't last long. When he discovered that her family wealth was a lie, and that she was essentially defrauding her mother to maintain her image, he broke up with her. He was a decent man, and he wanted no part of that toxicity. She was forced to sell the luxury handbags she had bought with my money just to pay her electric bill. She had to downgrade her apartment. She had to take extra shifts at her job, something she had always refused to do because she thought it was beneath her. Reality hit her hard. She realized that her comfortable life existed only because she had been draining mine. The illusion was gone. 3 months later, there was a knock on my door. It was a rainy Tuesday evening. I opened the door to find Rachel standing there. She looked different. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She was wearing a simple raincoat and jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired. She looked older. She looked real. She stood in the rain for a moment, shivering. Mom, she whispered. I opened the door wider to let her in, but I blocked the way to the living room. We stood in the entryway. "I'm wet," she said uselessly. "Here's a towel," I said, handing her one from the hall closet. She dried her face, her makeup streaked. She looked at me, and her eyes welled up with tears. Real tears this time, not the manipulative waterworks of before. "I didn't know," she sobbed softly. "I didn't know it would get this bad. I lost Mark. I lost the apartment. I'm living in a studio. It's horrible." I looked at her with pity, but I held my ground. "I know it's hard, Rachel. It's called life." "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why did you humiliate me like that?" "I didn't humiliate you," I said gently. "The truth humiliated you. I just stopped lying for you." She slumped against the wall, defeated. I thought you'd never stand up for yourself. I thought you liked taking care of me." "I do love taking care of you," I said, stepping closer and putting a hand on her shoulder. "But I cannot carry you. You have to walk." She looked at me, searching for the old weakness, the old open wallet. She didn't find it. Can I borrow some money for rent? Just this once?" she asked, a reflex. I shook my head slowly. "No, I can give you dinner. I can hug you. I can listen to you cry. But I will not give you a single cent. Not today, not ever." She stared at me for a long time. Then, she nodded slowly. She understood. The old dynamic was dead. She stayed for dinner. We ate spaghetti in relative silence. It wasn't a happy reunion, but it was an honest one. When she left, she walked to her own car. A cheaper, older model she had traded down for. She left understanding that she was on her own. And strangely, that was the most loving thing I had ever done for her. In the years since that night at the restaurant, my life has transformed. I began attending local senior gatherings. I reconnected with old friends I had neglected, because I was always too busy working extra shifts for Rachel. We go to the movies. We take walks in the park. We laugh. I checked my bank account yesterday. The number was positive. It was growing. I felt a sense of security I hadn't felt in 30 years. I set firm boundaries with everyone in my life. I realized that no is a complete sentence. I still love Rachel. We talk once a week. She is still struggling, but she is surviving. She is learning. She is becoming the woman she was meant to be, not the parasite she had become. My home feels lighter. The air feels cleaner. I reclaimed the space that was mine. I sleep soundly for the first time in years. No dread, no anxiety, just peace. The moral lesson. If there is one thing I have learned from this journey, it is this: a mother's love is deep, like the ocean. But even oceans have shores. If your love has no boundaries, it ceases to be love and becomes destruction. Generosity without limits invites exploitation. We think we are helping our children by shielding them from the world, but often we are only crippling them. Children must learn responsibility, not dependence. They must know that the world does not owe them a living, and neither do you. And to you, the mothers, the givers, the ones who pour from empty cups, love should never require sacrificing your dignity or your security. You are allowed to save yourself. You teach people how to treat you, and sometimes, the hardest lesson is relearning how to treat yourself. This is Mama Grace, signing off. Take care of your hearts, but don't forget to take care of your peace.